Well, hey, welcome to episode 43 of Lean Whiskey. I'm Mark Graban, joined by.
Jamie Flinchbaugh, good to see you.
Yeah, hey, Jamie.
For those
Happy.
watch, yeah, for those watching, you'll notice I'm not in my regular spot. I'm in a hotel. Not ideal, but here I am anyway.
There you are. You got a glass in the foreground, and the technology is working well. I was about to say happy holidays. I guess this is, in effect, a holiday episode. There's really no theme. Maybe the graphics will have some holiday imagery.
Sure, we can force it. No, no theme, but yeah, it's uh, my favorite season for sure. Got the had the music going, and when I had breaks in between meetings today, and Um, I actually left home Friday, and apparently the lights went on the house Saturday.
Yeah.
So I'll have to wait to get home to see all of that. But very always very excited for holiday season.
Now, do you take part personally with the tree, or does that just happen? Does the rest of the family
I
point
am
people?
usually there to help carry the tree inside.
Yeah.
I theoretically have a vote in selecting the tree, um, and I'm not allowed to be included in decorating the tree. So those are the boundary conditions of my involvement.
So you are team live tree then.
Oh yeah, definitely team live tree. We do have a fake tree that we put over the front door. There's a nice ledge and a big window, and it's actually my favorite decoration, even though it's a whole tree. But so we have a fake tree up there, up in the air. But I'm all live tree. Um, that's that's a showstopper for me. I think I want the live tree. I want the smell. The smell in particular is a big part of it.
Yeah. I grew up in a live tree house, even to the point of, I don't think my dad still does this, of going and cutting down a tree at
Yeah,
at a place where they're allowing you to do this and you're buying it after you've cut it down. But the
right.
bragging rights of not just going to a lot and picking it. I guess it's fresher.
It's fresher, but based on where I live, it's probably fresher by about a day. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we don't do that, but we do get a tree, and uh, that'll be when I get home. That'll be the task.
Yeah. Well, so today, and I don't think we've done this before. Maybe this is new. Maybe this is a Kaizen. I'm going to give the rundown of the plan for the episode. This just
All right.
occurred to me. So, Jamie and I are
Hopefully
going
it's
to.
hopefully it's not news to me. So
No, it's not, because Jamie and I did. I mean, maybe it doesn't seem like it. We do kind of plan out the episode a little. So
we have a structure.
we're going to have structured, not scripted. We're going to have a little bit more intro talk. We're going to get into our whiskey selections, where we are celebrating 100 years of the Suntory Distillery from Japan. So we'll leave secret for now what we're drinking tonight and what we're tasting. After that, we're going to be in the news, talking about an article related to safety at SpaceX, or maybe lack of safety in some
Hmm.
instances. Big Reuters investigation we are going to be discussing. That's going to be kind of the main lean section. We're going to close out. We have a fun fact about each of our hometowns, but that'll keep people listening, right?
Yeah, yeah. Stick around for the end. Can't wait to hear that part.
So that's the plan. That's the rundown. Thank you for listening or watching and hanging out with us again. Episode 43. So one thing Jamie and I we wanted to chat about real quick was giving a shout out to Steve Spear and Gene Kim, who have a new book just released called Wiring the Winning Organization. And Jamie and I both recorded podcasts with them. So I recorded with both Steve and Gene. That's already released, episode 493 of Lean Blog Interviews. Always fun to talk to Steve. It was my first time interviewing Gene, even though I've met him before. And
Okay.
you just recorded now, right?
And it was just with Steve. It's and my format's a little shorter of a podcast. I'm shooting for 20-minute episodes. Don't always hit that mark, but three main themes in their book: slowification, simplification, amplification. And so we focused on slowification. And so, partly just because it's fun, because it's a new word, it's a made up word, but it's a new word.
Right.
And so we dove into that. Steve and I go back to probably 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
We go back a long time. So his basically doctoral dissertation advisor, Kent Bowen, was also an advisor to me on the non-academic side. So when I was at Chrysler, a little bit when I was at MIT, and then at DT Energy. Steve was finishing up his PhD dissertation while I was at MIT. And so we got to know each other a little bit through all that. We have some of that shared history going back quite a ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I never met Steve when I came to MIT a year later than you, Jamie, but I met Steve in might have been 2007.
Okay.
So, and he's now been on the podcast 6 times, and it's always. I mean, Steve has a lot to say. He says things, I think, in a really lively, interesting way. He delves into military history, which is new to me. I don't know much about that as he does, but he talks about high reliability and the nuclear navy, and he loves that topic too.
Yeah, he does, and he's I'll say very much an original thinker. He's not repeating just what he heard from other people. He's not regurgitating lean doctrine. He's an original thinker, generating different ideas about this whole lean journey. And he's, for quite a while, he's kind of I don't want to say escape the orbit of the lean community, but he's not really. It's not really the way he talks about it anymore. And so this book reflects that, I think. But since his last book, The High Velocity Edge, this is it's been a while since that book, and so this is quite another step, as you and I both know. A new book is always quite the effort.
Yeah. So congratulations to them. And I think I'm going to have Gene come on the podcast as a solo guest, because he's written other books that are, really popular in, IT, DevOps, software, tech circles. He has a lot to say as well. So people go check that out. leanblog.org/493 and go subscribe to People Solve Problems, the podcast. From Jamie.
Yep, absolutely, and get to hear more of Steve in both places.
Yeah,
and us, for that matter.
Yeah. It makes me think. I'm staring at the cover of my book here. Maybe I should have written about mistakeification.
Mistakeification.
But I've made up a word.
Well, you need a good story behind it. So they are pretty clear. There's no word that covers what they're trying to convey. So, it's. I'm always skeptical when there's a new word like that, right? I'm like, did we need a new word? But they make a pretty good argument for needing a new word.
I interviewed a CEO who I met at the AME conference 2022, and he's written a book called Made Up Word, Gary Michel, Decomplify, which has a story of sort of like there was sort of a jokey, like, why not just say simplify? It somehow became decomplify. So, it stands out. It's not in the dictionary.
It's catchy. Probably not a word we needed, but that's okay. It's a catchy title, so that should evoke some readership.
Yeah, but his book, I interviewed him a while ago. It looks like it's coming out January 2nd, 2024. So maybe I can get him back on the Lean podcast again. So, all right. So moving on, I guess we're going to talk whiskey, birthday, anniversary, before we talk about a topic that I hate to say might drive me to drink, talking about safety and bad things there. Let's talk about, let's celebrate Suntory a little bit here. 100 years this year. So we almost missed it.
This year.
They were
We
founded.
almost missed it. We got it in, but they seem to be more just celebrating it almost, but maybe it's just paying more attention to it. So
Yeah, more.
we had nothing to do with 100 years. So we're simply celebrating as admirers. But Suntory has, besides being around 100 years, they've built quite the portfolio of whiskeys, not just Japanese whiskeys, but in the U.S. as well as other spirits. But they also very clearly, as my read on it is, they're not standing still.
Mhm.
Not just in terms of it's not to pick on Diageo, right? Is that the right name?
Diageo.
But Diageo seems to focus more on acquisitions, but Suntory really seems to want to move forward with what they have. They might do more acquisitions, but what are new and interesting things that we can do with the assets under roof? So 100 years. I love talking to 100-year-old companies.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I mean, that's an amazing accomplishment on any front. So
yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. So cheers to Suntory.
Well, cheers to them. And you mentioned U.S. It's been almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in 2024 of their acquisition of Jim Beam Distilling in Kentucky. The company's now Suntory Beam, part of the portfolio, and that's going to come up as we go through some of the tasting here. I'd have to dig up and maybe put it in the show notes. There was a really interesting, fun article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years after the acquisition. I don't think it was really a merger. I think it was an acquisition. But
I think, it was an acquisition.
Kentucky people might say merger, but Suntory Beam. About the culture clash, almost reminiscent of the old Michael Keaton movie Gung Ho.
Okay.
Of Kentucky tradition, Suntory. I think the word Kaizen came up in the article, but this culture clash of continuous improvement versus tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like Beam is now, who knows how much of this is Suntory influence, but Freddie No, the 8th generation distiller, is doing all kinds of innovative, interesting, creative things. I had a chance to go with my wife in October. We went, we'll come back to Suntory talk, but it's part of the Suntory family. We had a chance to go do an event. It was like a 4-hour event, midday on a Thursday, where we got to actually spend some time with Freddie and his dad, Fred No, the 7th generation master distiller from the Beam family tree, even though like somebody along the line was a nephew and their name's not Beam, but Fred's like 65. Freddie is in his mid 30s. And like they built, I think they literally call it the innovation distillery, where they're doing smaller batch experimental stuff.
Yeah. And Freddie's nickname is Booker.
Yeah.
So, when you look for Bookers
I think Little Book, it was the nickname.
Little Book is the experimentation one, right? But don't they also have?
Well, Booker was Freddie's grandfather.
Freddie's grandfather.
That's why they call him Little Book.
That's why he's Little Book. So
and there's the release, yeah.
So these are these are some of the whiskeys that not everybody knows they're from Jim Beam, because Jim Beam has a middle shelf reputation, if not bottom shelf reputation, and they own Old Crow, which definitely has a bottom shelf reputation. So, but along with that, like many of these distilleries, they have some really high quality expressions in different brands. So, really cool to meet people with that much history in the industry, and of course with the family and the company.
Because Beam goes back, I don't know when they're going to have their 250th anniversary for long. I believe they started, or at least before incorporated. I think it was the late almost 1800.
Okay.
When they started, so they have a long history. But Fred I remember one story that stood out because he was talking about failures and experiments and learning, and Fred was very interesting too. Fred, when you say, Jamie, of the brands or expressions that people don't know were Jim Beam, I think at some point they realized that was a bit of a problem, that people would come and visit and not know that Basil Hayden was
Hmm.
their product, or I think especially some of the newer ones, because they said the Basil Hayden label said Basil Hayden Distilling Company, which is really
Right.
not really a company, but they probably thought it was bad to put the Jim Beam name, because Jim Beam white label, the one they sell the most of, is not that great.
No, it's not, and it doesn't have a good reputation. So why sully the reputation of our others,
Right.
of our opportunities for, premium products? So I get it. I think maybe there's room to be included, um, in a lot of different ways, associated with the brand.
Well, and I
Um,
think they're adjusting and putting the Beam Distilling Company name on
yeah,
everything.
I think that's I think that's fair. But for us, we could technically drink anything in the Suntory family,
Yeah.
but we decided to stick closer to the Suntory side,
The origin.
you know,
Yeah.
the origins, the Japanese side, which we haven't had often on the lean whiskey show. So yeah, we both ended up with some Japanese whiskey.
Tell us what
So
you're drinking. I'll let you go
yeah,
first.
so I am drinking a fairly easy to find one, the Hibiki Japanese Harmony.
Hmm.
It's not their. What's interesting is it's this. I don't think it's their lowest end in Hibiki, but I think it's the easiest to find, of Hibiki. Um, so
Well, in Japan, I mean, they make Suntory whiskey that is sold in like
right,
6 liter plastic bottle.
yeah. So they make much cheaper whiskey. But called Suntory whiskey, right? And I feel like they might have another brand in that same category. So, but even within Hibiki, I think Japanese Harmony isn't their base. But either way, it's very common to find. It's not hard to find. There's some places you'll go and it's one of like two Japanese whiskeys.
Yeah.
So it's probably one of the easiest Japanese whiskeys to find. I brought it since I'm traveling. I brought it in these aged in ore containers. So for those that are looking, see,
Yeah.
you can write with a little pen on it what's in the bottle, and it's nice and well protected. And so I did, since I couldn't just go get something at the bar
But not
and
that.
trust in it. Not this. So I brought some with me on my trip. So, and I
We're-
like it. I don't drink it often, but it's smooth, as most every Japanese whiskey is.
yeah.
But it stands out. It's definitely different than most, I'll say, Scotch or other types of whiskeys, and I enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It says here, I mean, it's described as a blended whiskey, which is more common in Japan. And the Beam people said
Yes,
they're learning a lot about blending from the
from
Japanese.
Suntory. Yeah,
Freddie No is doing, like, the Little Book series is very
all
specifically
blended.
blended, all kinds
Right.
of, not just bourbons, blended of different whiskeys. But yeah, it says here, Harmony is a relatively newer creation. It was born in 1989 to celebrate their 90th. It says, well, that doesn't add up then. It says here, born in 1989 to celebrate 90 years of Suntory whiskey.
I don't have an answer to that one.
And
So,
that's their Suntory
well,
website.
maybe they created it so it would be released for their 90th. Um,
Oh, that makes, yes, there we go.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
So, but if you study, and you know actually more about this than I do, but if you study, the history of Japanese whiskey, they studied in Scotland. They studied Scotch,
Yes.
and of course, when they were doing that, blending was the predominant form of Scotch whiskey. So that hence their one of the reasons they picked up on the art of blending as a cornerstone for the whiskey making that they do. Um, So yeah, they work very deliberately, very thoroughly, um, going to Scotland, learning how to do this, bringing the trade, the craft back to Japan.
Yeah. So there are those connections. And so I think part of the difference is I think the House of Suntory, the broader company, including beer, was 1899, and the distillery was founded in 1923, I think is what I saw
That
out from a little real time research. But yeah, I like Hibiki a lot. What I'm drinking is their original, if you know, if not flagship whiskey. On the bottle it does say 1923, and that
right,
is the Yamazaki whiskey, which is a blend of different whiskeys finished in different barrel casks, including sherry and Japanese oak, and there's that blending and that combination. Now what I'm drinking, and I'm going to hold up, is I brought some of this from Texas, and apparently I got a 4-ounce bottle through TSA. I'm going to wrap myself out on that. So I poured 2 ounces, and there's still quite a bit left. So this is not the like what you see, if you see it anywhere. Generally, is Yamazaki 12-year age statement. If you find it at a bar, it's usually anywhere from $50 to $80 a pour, depending on
right.
the bar. Then there's the Yamazaki 18, which has become even harder to find, and of course is going to cost more if you find it. But there's such shortages. Now the one that I'm actually drinking, and I don't have the bottle to hold up when we share pictures, what they call Yamazaki Distillers Reserve, because what they did, no age statement. If you've got the supply problem or the problem of too much demand, and I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's
Right.
decidedly non-age statement. It's said to be an average of 8 years, which means then if some of it's younger, you couldn't call it even an 8-year
No, not if it's averaged.
whiskey. But yeah, I think it's just younger Yamazaki, and this is a bottle I brought back from Japan, so it definitely has all the Japanese labeling and all. But Yamazaki is not easy to find in Japan. At least the last time I was there in 2019, it wasn't.
Yeah, and I have yet to experience it. It's one of those that it's just, yeah, I have seen it on a menu, but I wasn't paying those prices for sure pour.
Yeah.
Love to find a bottle. I don't want to say I'd pay anything, but I'd overpay just to have a bottle once, and I expect that opportunity will come up at some point. Um, but it's interesting, how these things are named, because you hear Distiller's Reserve and you think that's got to be their premium product, and nope,
Maybe.
that's our base product. Because we can't get enough of the 12 and the 18 in order to sell. So you hope that they're not taking short-term view of like, let's get some stuff out there with a no age statement, and then
I mean,
they'll have even less of the 12 and 18-year-old in the future.
yeah. I mean, other distillers have done that, including I think Beam, because when I was there, they talked about putting the 9-year age statement back on the base Knob Creek.
Yes. And I have a couple Knob Creeks at home. I think I have 9 and 12.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think Jim Beam really was at the heart of that. Um, any whiskey is fine. They bought Old Crow and then started bottling young Jim Beam and calling it Old Crow. Um, and you kind of think that
Wow.
yeah, shouldn't be allowed. So yeah, they've been able to recover their trajectory, and so yeah, kudos to them.
But the expectations have changed on age, because Fred now was talking about how his dad's generation and earlier, they thought anything beyond like 5 or 6 years was crazy, too long,
Yeah, it's just wasted.
too much age.
Too much age, and I think I'm not sure if it affected the taste, or if it was simply, why are you waiting? Like, what's
Yeah.
pour it and drink it. But you also had, plenty of problems back there with controls and challenges around that, where the longer you wait, the more chance you run of wasting the whole thing. So,
And losing more angel share
and losing more angel
over
share
time.
as
But
well.
yeah, I mean, people get so wound up around age. And, I've had the Knob Creek 9, 12, 15, and 18. And then they've got a Jim Beam lineage product that they put out. That's either, so that I believe is just regular old Jim Beam, but aged something like 15 or 17 years. So
Okay.
that's interesting to see, how people kind of really focus on age. But I was going to say one other thing about Yamazaki. I was in California last week and was at a bar that had a Yamazaki 12 that was their 100th anniversary special release, as it said on the label. Now, this was still the 12-year age statement. It was more expensive. And when I read about it, it's one of these where they say they picked select special barrels to give like the best, the Yamazaki-ish the Yamazaki-ist. That's not a word either. Version. And, the bartender said there were only 1,000 bottles released. I don't know if that was for the US or worldwide, but they had one of those. So, we splurged and tried it. Didn't have a chance to try it side by side because they were out of like the quote unquote regular
Yeah.
Yamazaki 12. But still, like, all right, I'm celebrating it. Celebrating Suntory, celebrating Yamazaki.
Yeah, and one of the neater opportunities of Suntory buying Beam was the Legend
I learned they say Legent.
Legion.
I'd been saying it
Okay,
wrong. I'd been saying Legent. It's Legent.
Legion. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's fine. Do what they want.
Yeah.
Their brand.
Sorry to correct you.
Yeah, but this was, so this was just as we talked about earlier, taking Japanese blending techniques and applying it to Beam whiskey, American bourbon. And so it really is a product of them really trying to bring together the two houses, if you will, into its own experiment. And what's amazing about it is the base product, base Legent product is not very expensive. It's
Right.
very affordable and quite good.
Yeah. And I'm going to maybe have a second pour later on. But when I was at Beam, I'm going to hold up the bottle here. I was able to buy a special release. They call it Legent Yamazaki Cask Finish Blend. So it's not a blend with Yamazaki whiskey, but it was Legent that was then, I'm going to talk about the supply chain here. The whiskey, I don't know how many barrels it was shipped to Japan and then aged secondarily in Japan in Yamazaki formerly used barrels. So they can't call it bourbon because it touched, in a used bourbon. So they can call it a cask finish blend. It's a gorgeous bottle.
Yeah.
The Legent Yamazaki, and it's a higher strength, higher proof. It's 114 proof, 57% ABV compared to the Legent product. You can see there's a lot of color.
Yeah.
From the different barrels there. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to try this again later, and might still be available if people are a Legent fan. But it's curious to me that like it would have been a lot easier to ship empty barrels, and you can even knock down the barrels and rebuild them.
You can.
So you're not breathing air. But
yeah, I wonder if in order to put Yamazaki on it, even if it's just their own standards and nothing legal, they really wanted it to have further aging in Japan. And of course, the climate is different there too. And
true.
so maybe they believe that was a factor in what they were trying to accomplish. They didn't want a lot more heavy-ish Kentucky aging with the temperature swings, they wanted something milder. Obviously, I don't know why they made that decision, but and it could be nothing more than, I don't think this is the reason, but still could be nothing more than they had more room in the rick houses in Japan. I doubt that's the case, but
I was going to say the reason for doing it is story and marketing and the value. I don't know if they did an ROI of the cost of shipping it versus how much more do we think we can sell it for because of.
No, I think when you're doing a product like that, you're just like, what do we want to do that's cool? And if that's the better story, then that's what you do. So
yeah. So that's I think I'm going to try a second taste, and I'll try to keep some around, Jamie. If I get to see you 2024, I'll let you try it.
That would be fantastic. So cheers to Suntory. 100 years.
Yeah.
Anyone that makes 100 years, whether a human or a business.
Yeah.
Cheers.
100 years of distilling, and congratulations to everybody at Suntory Beam more broadly. I tell you, in the last year or so, it's opened my eyes. They make a lot of their range of products. I've become a big fan of the Beam family of whiskeys.
Yeah, and you've opened my eyes to it. I was definitely dismissive, even though I've enjoyed separately some of their products. I think I'm opening my palate up to some more Beam experiences.
Because they don't have the cachet that Buffalo Trace has built.
No, but honestly, that's getting annoying. So I'm happy to find places that aren't coming from Buffalo Trace.
Yeah. All right. So in the news, heavier topic here. Here's the headline from Reuters, a fairly in-depth investigation involving them tracking down data that hasn't really been volunteered by SpaceX. The headline reads, at SpaceX, worker injuries soar in Elon Musk's rush to Mars, and they identified 600 injuries since the year 2014. So, Jamie, what's your reaction to, before we dig into the details of that number? People might say, "Oh, well, it's been 10 years, and oh, it's sad, but injuries are going to happen."
Yeah, so the first thing anytime I'm looking at a headline like that is, hey, we're just going to take advantage of anything that says Elon Musk is going to get some attention.
Sure.
And so I look at, is this a hastily put together article, or is this researched? And this, I don't want to say it's a doctoral dissertation, but this was thorough, serious, investigative journalism.
Right.
There's not a lot of days I get to say I respect how people approach the craft of journalism, because there's just, and a lot of it's the pressure that they're under, and I get that, but there's just a lot that's hastily put together with little information and very little double fact checking. This was well researched.
Yeah.
This was thorough, and while the headline is a little, evocative, the research behind it is well done and serious. So to me, that's my first cut. I start to look at that. At the numbers themselves, there's a lot of it. You have to start. It's very easy to kind of go, well, what's the denominator, right? How many hours worked? How many people? How what's the comparison against their peers? But no matter what the denominator is, this is a poor performance, and it's a poor performance, right? The whole theory behind rushing to Mars is to save humanity, and I get that, in order to do big hard things to save humanity, that humans may die, but this seems a cavalier approach to that premise. That in order to save humanity, we have to amputate and kill people and send them into comas for doing, in the end, the tasks that they're doing. This was not space lifts.
It was
this
not
was
rocket
not
science.
No, this was not in hey, a capsule exploded in space, or we couldn't land on Mars well and crashed. This was people with fork trucks and picking up things and moving things. This was stuff that are the kind of work that's done every day all over the world
Right.
in a much safer way.
Right. And the injuries, and there was a lot of stories in there. I mean, it's not to dismiss a cut or a scrape, but some of these were, like you said, 8 amputations, a fatality that came from a fall and a head injury, somebody with a hole into their skull, with a coma, and so injury rates are one of the standard comparisons that OSHA and others use. So the SpaceX injury rate, best anyone can tell, because SpaceX doesn't seem to follow the guidelines and requirements around reporting, 6 times higher than the industry average, 4.8,
Yep.
which is that injuries per 100 workers rate? I'd have to go back to the article.
Yeah, I always forget the denominator there.
8 times higher than industry average, and it's injuries per 100 workers is the rate.
Yeah.
Now, as you had pointed out to me, Jamie, one of their sites, Redmond, Washington, was right at that industry average. But Brownsville was 6x the industry. McGregor was more than 3x. Hawthorne was more than 2x. And so, I guess weighted by the number of workers at each site, far worse than average. And I had some opportunity to learn from Paul O'Neill, who was the safety champion as CEO at Alcoa. Paul O'Neill would have never said being average is fine.
No, yeah, he would never say being average is fine, because that kind of means you're not doing anything special to try to protect people. That's almost the definition of average, right? You're doing nothing special to try to protect people, and of course, he wouldn't sleep well at night if that was the case. But I've been in literally hundreds of factories around the world. I assessed many. Back in my consulting days, I did assessments, and I got pretty used to looking at numbers across many different industries. And I'd have to say, if I saw a number like 4.8, I'd go, what the heck are you guys doing here? Like, this is,
Or what aren't you doing?
or what aren't you doing? But this has got to be your number one problem if I saw a number like that, regardless of what you were doing. I don't care if you were in charge of axe throwing testing. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. 4.8 is too many. It's just a huge number of injuries, and I want to go down this rabbit hole, but the fundamental thing about injuries is that every occurrence, you can't control the severity, right? So, like, you get in a car accident, it could be scratched paint, and it could be a fatality.
Right.
There's little difference of what you do to control what that outcome is. It just happens to be what it is.
From an unsafe practice of, like, allowing someone into a robot cage without it being locked out, that could lead to a scrape or a fatality.
Right. And just take a simple trip and fall. You trip and fall. You could catch yourself on a table and never hit the ground.
Yeah.
You could, hit the ground and scrape an elbow. You could hit the ground and hit your head and die. And which of those outcomes you get is random.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's random. It's very little to kind of go, well, we're not going to worry about the trip and fall, but we are going to prevent you from dying when it happens.
Yeah.
Very hard to make that kind of trade-off. So it's really about occurrences. And so the more occurrences you have, the more probability you have of severe occurrences, whether they be comas or amputations or fatalities.
Yeah.
And so the game is not how do you prevent people from dying, but how do you prevent incidents from happening in the first place. That's the leverage, regardless of what your industry is.
Yeah. Now, there are certain things that certainly create particular risks in rockets, fuels, explosive risk. Maybe they are managing that part well, but I mean, to say in a blanket statement, people defend or make excuses for SpaceX and for Elon, about, oh, well, what they're doing is so innovative and it's going to be inherently risky. And you look at, the worker who died, the story there is that they were trying to move some cargo. They didn't have straps to hold it down. Like, this is not rocket science. And the worker decided to try holding it down, like with body weight, some sort of large piece of foam, I think, and the wind caught it, and he went flying and fell and died and hit his head. Like that
Right.
should not have happened. And you think culturally, if somebody is feeling pressured or thinking they're going to be rewarded for putting themselves at risk to avoid a delay, like that's a culture problem.
Absolutely. And I was just at a company, and I just saw, a tie down costs $9, by
Right.
the way. A tie down costs, I mean, a serious tie down, like a tie down you use on trucks, like it costs $9, right? So you can't tell me it's an expense problem. But you go to other industries, and of course, Paul O'Neill's a great example. I mean, smelting aluminum, this is not making ice cream, right? This is serious work.
It's hot. It's
But
definitely hot. Yeah.
it's hot, it's heavy, it's just dangerous. And so you go to another industry like semiconductors as an example. You have high voltages, very high, massively high voltages. You have massively high temperatures. You have vacuums. You have all sorts of ways in which the environment is inherently dangerous. You have chemicals that could kill you. So the environment is inherently dangerous. Yet
Well,
the safety record is nowhere near 4.8, right?
Right.
And a lot of it comes down to culture, and culture across the board, all down to the employee, including the employee. But I'll use Intel as an example. Old client of mine, they had a safety record and a safety culture where you were expected to point out anyone who had a lapse, whatever it was that was around them. I remember I was in a like an auditorium, and the divider was across, and because it's a divider, there was a door, but there was a step on the door.
Tripping.
And yeah, it was a tripping hazard. It's built into those big giant dividers. And someone I saw someone kind of trip just a little bit, and someone said, please watch out for those steps. And on the surface, it was, you're like, oh, that was sarcasm, like, hey, don't trip, dummy, right? But no, it was serious, and the expected response is thank you. Like, it doesn't matter if you tried to walk because your hands were full. You tried to walk down the stairs without holding the handrail. Somebody would stop you and go like, no, you take the elevator. I don't care if it's one flight. If you can't walk down the stairs holding the handrail, you're not supposed to. Right. Just don't. So
telling people be careful is probably not the best countermeasure. How do you
in that moment?
in?
But it's the point is that it's every moment, right? It's every person, every moment is an opportunity to either remind people around safety, solve safety, and reinforce safety behaviors. And that's where it starts to become part of the culture, is that it's always on, right? You kind of live with that that culture from the top down.
And the fatality where they didn't have the tie down, if one version of the story is, well, they didn't want to slow it down to wait and go get tie downs. The flip side of the question is, why the hell didn't they have tie downs proactively to begin with? Why did not think about that? Why didn't they design that in? And Paul O'Neill culture would have been one where he gave out his phone number to say, hey, if there are safety issues not being addressed by your local leadership, call me as CEO. And that budget should not be a barrier. There were other things, from the story of people doing welding, not getting respirators. that's not rocket science. Like another
That's
injury where they said,
crazy.
well, there was a lack of walkie-talkies for communication and there was poor lighting. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not a matter of money. It's this different mindset where Paul O'Neill would have called safety. He did call safety a precondition, not a priority, a precondition. But it doesn't seem like there's a culture where Elon's telling people, hey, tweet at me if you're not getting the right safety response, because there's a lot of allegations, not in his own words, but people who worked at SpaceX saying basically Elon didn't care about safety. I'm paraphrasing, but that was
Right,
the
right,
message.
and that was the message, and you know, to use Paul O'Neill again, it's Paul O'Neill's proof that you can emphasize safety and actually make more money, right? It
There's no
wasn't a
trade-off.
trade-off decision.
Right.
It wasn't a trade-off decision. They increased profit while increasing safety, and so the argument of the leadership of SpaceX um, is that no, we have an important job to do, and safety be damned. It's a trade-off. It's presented as a trade-off. So we can either achieve our mission, or we can do things carefully, but we can't do both.
Well,
And Paul O'Neill proved that's not true.
no. No, I mean, this is outside the scope of the Reuters investigation, but earlier this year, they did the first Starship launch. And here's an example where, like, doing it correctly, doing it safely would have been faster. Elon was hell-bent against having the concrete pit underneath the launch pad. And Elon even tweeted, this might be a mistake. And it turned out apparently to be a mistake, because without the pit, which everyone said you need to have the pit, the rockets threw a bunch of rocks up into the air, which supposedly broke some of the engine nozzles and blasted out rock, for miles in different directions.
Yeah.
And then they got shut down by the FAA until they could, kind of, I don't how long the delay would have been to build the pit versus the delay they took by not building the pit and then having big, huge problems that even Elon sort of anticipated, hey, this might be a mistake. Like literally
Right.
the word mistake.
Yeah, and that's bizarre because it's counterintuitive. It's not evidence based, and I think the other the high visibility vests is another example where it has nothing to do with speed, right?
Yeah,
So
supposedly
this
Elon
argument,
doesn't like yellow.
he doesn't like yellow because it just doesn't look good. Even though I'd argue, as since he's a car guy technically, yellow calipers are fantastic looking.
A
Right?
yellow Corvette looks great.
Yellow Porsche. I mean, he loves to pick on Porsche, and that's fine. But yeah, hey, we're not going to not wear a high visibility vest because it'll slow us down getting to Mars. I just don't like yellow.
That's just weirdness.
It's weirdness, but the problem is culture. Culture is a byproduct of people's experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and the experience people take away from that is that basic procedures of safety don't matter, right? And so it doesn't even matter why he doesn't like yellow or why he doesn't like high visibility vests. The experience people take away with that is not about vests, it's about safety, right? And so the experiences people have affect their beliefs, affect their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter why he doesn't like high visibility vests. It sends a signal
Mm-hmm.
that safety is not very important.
It sends a signal that the whims of the CEO are the most important thing. I mean, there are stories of Tesla factory not being able to have yellow guardrails or yellow markings for where it's safe to walk, machines being repainted from yellow to other colors. Like it's not going to be an environment with physical safety if there's not psychological safety for people to speak up about safety risks or to disagree, with the boss. And there were other things in the article about managers not listening to warnings or not responding to reports of people not following safety protocols. And I think even more damning was this idea. So, again, back to Paul O'Neill, we're making this comparison. Paul O'Neill realized as CEO, he couldn't delegate responsibility for safety. I don't think a CEO can delegate responsibility for culture. You have others involved, but it said about Elon in the article that he takes the stance that workers are responsible for protecting themselves, according to more than a dozen current and former employees. Well, that's BS. If you're not giving people the equipment they need to protect themselves, you can't say that's a worker responsibility. And then they even claimed, there were company statements that accountability for injuries falls on a cadre of employees known as responsible engineers. So this is where there was a product part failure that led to injuries. And they said, well, REs are ultimately responsible, and RE is the delegated SpaceX representative. Like that, I'll stop saying BS. That's bullshit.
Yeah, and OSHA, OSHA spoke up, right, around things like that. And this is, again, the experiences people have affect the culture. They have failed to submit data to OSHA as required many, many times. They let's see here. They've since 2016, they failed to submit reports most of those years.
SpaceX did.
And SpaceX did. And so that, again, failure to report basically sends a signal to everybody inside the company, in this case, more management than employees. But it sends, it's not like most employees are going, hey, are we reporting our OSHA stats? They probably don't know. But to management, it sends a signal that, hey, we don't,
right.
And I get you don't want government intervention, but just failure to report stats, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard.
But to me, regulation usually comes as a result of bad behavior, bad corporate practices in different ways.
Bad corporate practices, and what's interesting, not to pin it all on one guy, but Tesla has also been accused of failure to report workplace safety, and so you do start to see a pattern where they don't hear about incidents, and then when they find out there are, they start to look and they find out there's more at Tesla than anybody knew.
Right.
And Tesla's numbers aren't going to be like SpaceX's are, but nevertheless, it's indicative of a leader-led culture that signals to people these things are important. So even if it was a lowly supervisor who told that one person, yeah, we don't have time to go get tie downs, we got to get this thing moved.
Yeah.
Is it that supervisor's fault, or is it the signals that were sent to that supervisor that speed mattered more than safety?
Yeah. Now, this is going back 5 years ago, but Tesla compared to auto industry, Tesla had 31% higher injury rates, and serious injuries were more than double industry average. And then, 2020, Tesla said, well, we're improving. So, okay, fine. But, there is kind of a common theme across Elon Musk companies. But I wonder, it begs the question of what's the point of OSHA and Cal OSHA in the state of California? Reuters said they reviewed records and found no sanctions for data reporting failures. And then when there are safety violations for injuries, including deaths, the fines are in the range of hundreds and thousands of dollars. I didn't say hundreds of thousands. I said hundreds.
No.
Like the death, I think there was a $7,000 fine. And any corporate cynic is going to say, just pay the damn fines.
Right.
That's like what's the point of the fine? It probably costs OSHA more than $7,000 to collect $7,000. I would say, don't bother. There's no teeth in the regulation.
Right. Now that's legislation, right? They don't have the tools available to them.
Yeah.
probably don't have a great budget when you look at how many people, they need to monitor. And,
Good point.
going back Dr. To Deming like principles, you can't inspect quality into the system. You can't inspect safety into the system via OSHA either.
You probably can't
And
find your way to safety.
you definitely can't
Right.
find your way to safety,
Sure.
right? So, because honestly, I mean, any lawsuit, even a settlement of a lawsuit, is going to cost more than anything OSHA's ever going to do to you. So OSHA's, honestly, it's can you, if you want to cheat OSHA, can you cheat OSHA? Absolutely. Um, I think the whole point of OSHA is they're there to hold people accountable to a standard that everybody aspires to, but sometimes fails to deliver on.
Yeah.
I think if your intent is uh, to outflank OSHA, well, this demonstrates it, but it's not that hard to do,
Yeah.
right? Just pay whatever fines and don't report and do all those sorts of things. And I'm sure that they're certainly not the only company that does that, which brings me to an interesting. Now, this is a very biased study, but the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health. So it's I don't know if it's a lobby organization or an activist organization. It's not.
It's a dot.
It's not a. Yeah, it's not a government agency, as it almost sounds like. But nevertheless, their mission is to keep workers safe. So I'm not going to complain about any of that. Um, they have the Dirty Dozen that they publish every year, and it's a national recognition of companies with poor safety records. Um, Now, what I'm a little disappointed in is it's not data driven; it's nomination driven. So if you have a story to tell and want to put your story in, you can nominate yourself. Um, but the whole point is that there are companies with bad safety records, bad safety cultures, all over the place. SpaceX isn't the only one, and this council, this organization, calls them out in the Dirty Dozen, which is a pretty good name, I have to say.
Yeah.
Better movie, but a good name.
Movie I've heard of but
And
never seen.
oh, it's worth a watch. Absolutely worth a watch. But interestingly, Tesla's there for 2016, for 2023. Tesla's on the list of the Dirty Dozen for 2023, which not a good sign.
I just wish Elon and company, which mainly means I wish Elon would understand, the idea of false trade-offs here, that doing more for safety isn't going to inherently hurt profits. It's not going to inherently slow you down. At what point does it become difficult to attract employees?
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, people are going to be drawn to the mission and to the excitement of it, but that's no reason to take advantage of that, I would say, in terms of, just violating some known safety practices. And that's the thing. Like, there's the edge of innovation, of which Tesla is on that frontier in a lot of ways, but there's no reason that they should have more fires in the paint shop than they used to have when it was a NUMMI facility.
Right.
That stuff is not, like, how you paint a car is not on the frontier of innovation.
No, and either is moving something in a truck, right? So that's the thing. I mean, if it really was like nobody's ever done this in the world, and we got hurt doing it, you'd kind of go, okay, in the name of advancement, that these things happen.
Well,
but it's fires in a paint shop, and it's people, dying, moving stuff in a truck. And it's a lot of it.
right.
It's not advanced science stuff.
Well, look, and for all the concern that NASA had for safety, there was the Apollo, was it Apollo 1 that had the fire on the launch pad?
Mm-hmm.
They learned from
I think so.
and
They learned from that.
And there were a lot of firsts happening. But then as things move along, you have the stories of the Challenger and then the Columbia, of people trying to speak up and not being heard or being told not to speak up. Situations are different. Amy Edmondson's new book, Right Kind of Wrong, she categorizes, there's a difference, and she tells stories in the book. There's difference, like the first time they were ever trying to do like an artificial heart and lung machine for procedures, like that's on the frontier of innovation, and people died due to things that in hindsight you're like, well, that shouldn't have happened, but it was their first time doing something, or just the attempt at innovation failed. That's different than a kind of mistake where somebody cuts into the wrong side of the patient. Like not all mistakes are created equally in terms of what's preventable versus what is bound to happen while you're experimenting.
Right. And so falling off a ladder, it doesn't matter if you're painting a house or you're building a rocket. There's ways to prevent falling off a ladder. So it's more about the incidents and the acts than it is about the domain in which you're playing in, that determines whether it's a known risk and a preventable risk versus the price of progress.
Right. Yeah.
And this is this is not a the reason this is not an Elon bashing episode. It's about the importance of leadership, the importance of culture, the importance of systems, the importance of problem solving to build a safety culture, and the accountability of leadership to make all that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But to tie it back to the leader, though, if you go look at most of the let's write a super important biography about this person, innovators in the world, whether it's Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or on and on you go, they had people around them that held them accountable in more ways than one, right? Steve Gates had Woz, but he also had Bill Campbell, and he had other people. He was difficult to deal with. He was temperamental. He was all the things people accuse Musk of, but he also had a cadre of people who could challenge him and push back on some of the things he was doing that weren't making sense. And I don't want to say a challenge, but I worry that that's what's missing in this particular equation.
It seems like that is missing. Yes. I can couch it also. Okay. I also worry about that. And a company might be able to innovate for a while in spite of that, but that's not generally how a company is going to achieve and sustain world-class performance without the ability to challenge, without psychological safety.
Yeah. So for leaders out there listening, there's accountability for a safety system, accountability for a safety culture, and to go back to something we said earlier, you have to focus on every incident because you can't predict when a trip hazard is an inconvenience and when it's a fatality. So every safety incident, and this is true of any problem, right? You have a lapse in your accounting system, and sometimes it's decimal dust, and sometimes it's a SEC finding, right? It's a restatement of earnings. It just you can't predict. I have this failure. I don't know how far it's going to go.
Yeah.
So safety is absolutely falls into that domain, and so you speed on your way to work. You could have a stressful commute, or you could kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You can't predict what outcome's going to happen from a bad safety practice, and that's leadership's job to set the system and the culture to make sure that that's understood.
Yes, it is leadership's job. To extend what you were saying, Jamie, it's even the near misses that are the opportunity for learning, because there are more near misses than there are injuries from the same set of circumstances. So not just encouraging, but making it safe, rewarding people for reporting near misses instead of punishing them,
Right.
is going to make all the difference. And like you said, to say leadership is responsible for the culture and safety, I don't think that's management bashing. If somebody listening wants to say, all right, well, Graban was Elon bashing, I can, that's fine. Yeah. As they used to say, don't at me, but I'm not on Twitter anymore, really. So I wouldn't see it, but okay. Like, all right, fine. I'll sleep fine at night if somebody says, you're an Elon basher. I think it's fair criticism.
Yeah, but it's really not why we bring it up. We bring it up because this is a well documented, and that I really, you sent me the article, right? So you sent me this article. You had found this article, and I'm like, the headline reads like an Elon bashing kind of article. When you read it and you know what good journalism looks like, you're like, this is good work. This is serious journalism, well researched. So this is a pretty well understood problem. It's a preventable problem, and going back to Paul O'Neill, there's no trade-off between progress and success and operating safely. And so because it's not a trade-off, it's just a decision. You just have to choose that it's important.
Yeah. If I were looking to bash Elon, I'd read the section of the article that talked about, I'm going to do it. For years, Musk and his deputies found it, quote, hilarious to wave the flamethrower around. This is, on a rocket site, firing it near other people and giggling like they were in middle school.
Now, I could imagine playing with a flamethrower, but I would be thoughtful about when and where I did it. Yeah. Probably wouldn't aim it at people. So,
all right. So I dragged it back down a minute. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll
move on.
We'll let people average out the high ground.
All right. Thank you, Jamie, for dragging us back toward the more thoughtful and reasonable ground there. All right. Is that enough SpaceX talk?
That's enough SpaceX talk, I think. We'll certainly, we certainly still hope for the success. I think.
Yeah.
Between Blue Origin and SpaceX have different missions, that's not different missions, different purposes behind what they're trying to do. But people do bash the whole idea of going to space, and the end goals of these organizations are humanity saving types of missions, and I do hope both of them are wildly successful in the end, because I do think that they have a lot to offer humanity if successful.
Yeah. I don't know, Jamie. The defenders will say, Jamie, Mark, you've never accomplished what he has. How dare you criticize him? I'm like, all right. I'm fine with that.
We're trying to educate that there's an opportunity to do it better.
Yeah. All right. So I'm enjoying a little bit of the Legent Yamazaki.
Excellent. I just have my Hibiki, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, when you say just,
happy.
I mean, that's
happy with my choice.
It's a very nice whiskey to say. I just have,
It really is. I have to say, like I said, I think everybody here can probably find it on a shelf. It is one of the more readily available Japanese whiskeys, and worth picking up.
Mm-hmm. And the Hibiki 17 year and 21 year are in that Yamazaki 18 elevated range of really hard to find and super expensive.
Yeah, and I've either not seen them or got frugal. I don't even remember which, but this is quite affordable. I would say affordable. It makes it sound like it's a $30 whiskey, but it's worth it. It's affordable-ish and worth it.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to close with a fun fact about your hometown. Jamie came up with this idea. I'm going to let you go last, Jamie, because I think your fun fact is more fun. So I struggled to come up with a fun fact related to Livonia, Michigan, which is where I grew up from first grade through high school. Best I can come up with is that it's the birthplace of Hockey Hall of Famer Mike Modano.
Which is a name I don't recognize.
One of our claims to fame. Not that much fun if you're not a hockey fan. Now, I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and so no offense to the Wright brothers and all kind of the obvious things that say about Dayton, Ohio. Dayton was home to the first soapbox derby in 1933.
Which is pretty cool. Because, I don't want to say everybody knows the soapbox derby, but yeah, a lot of people know the soapbox derby. A lot of people have participated in it. Probably a lot of listeners have participated in it. And
did you, Jamie?
Yes,
you did. Yep. See, I only did Pinewood Derby, which was not a car you rode in. That was a Boy Scouts little wood car that goes down a track.
No, I did that too.
Yeah,
did that too. And we had one soapbox derby. I think. At Memorial Field or something like that. I still remember the road to nowhere, the hillside where the cars would come down. So, yeah. So do you know who won in 1933?
I do not.
So, yeah, I doubt that nobody's ever recorded that one. So, but that would be cool. Like, hey, this is the family, or this is I'm the heir to the person who won the first soapbox derby. That would be, maybe you are, and you don't even know.
Maybe now they're the vice president of aerodynamics at a major automaker. I don't know if that's even a job, but
that would be. It is, but that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So how about you, Jamie?
Yeah, so I'm from York, Pennsylvania. Born and raised, as they say. York. York has a lot of fun facts, but York was the capital during the Revolutionary War when Congress got pushed out of Philadelphia. So late 1777, for those that aren't keeping full track of the story, for less than a year, Congress convened in York, Pennsylvania. And it was there when they wrote the Articles of Confederation. And so Yorkers, I'll say, if you actually read the Declaration of Independence, the U of United is lowercase.
Oh,
yes,
that's a fun fact.
That is a fun fact. So we're the United States of America. We're only united in our Declaration of Independence. We're not one entity when we write the Declaration of Independence. So is July 4th our birthday? Or just our Independence Day. Right. And so the Articles of Confederation is what make us a capital U, United States of America. Since they were written in York, Pennsylvania, there are many businesses, including a bar, called First Capital. Because there's many in York that would say, well, that makes us the United States of America, and that makes York the first capital of the United States. Now, you won't find a lot of history books that claim that York, Pennsylvania is the first capital, but we have our stories. The facts are what the facts are. Whether you interpret that as York being the first capital of the United States, I'll leave it to you. I'm going to expect most people aren't on my side on that one, but we'll stick with it. We're the first capital of the United States.
It's funny with the business name thing. We lived in San Antonio for 3.5 years, which is, of course, where the Alamo is. And you wouldn't believe how many businesses are Alamo something. Alamo Exterminators, Alamo Donuts, Alamo Plumbing.
Part of your identity, so why not, right?
Yeah. Not a differentiator in San Antonio, but...
Not within, not for a local business, but at least shows your pride in being from San Antonio.
But back in the day when the phone book alphabetical order mattered, I don't know if anyone was like AAA Alamo.
Right. Yeah. How do we get the front of that Alamo list?
But Alamo is pretty good, but you could trump that with AAA Alamo.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Thank you for doing the episode. Thank you for listening or watching. I feel like did you ever watch the show Pardon the Interruption, Jamie? Yes, yeah.
I've seen it.
Like,
I'm not sure I watched it.
so back when I pitched, or when we first started talking about lean whiskey, I wanted to do it basically like Pardon the Interruption format, with like a timer and a clock that would go off. And we're a slower, longer version of PTI. We're not really arguing too much, but PTI always does at the end corrections. So I'm going to do a correction. The article that we'll put a link to in the show notes about the Beam Suntory culture clash, it was not the Wall Street Journal, it was the Financial Times.
Ooh, even better.
Close.
That's fun.
But I stand corrected. And that article is still available online. The headline was Beam Suntory, a volatile Japanese US blend. It's interesting that they didn't say, I thought the company name was Suntory Beam. Is that also a correction?
I used to be a loyal Financial Times reader.
Okay, a second correction. The company name is actually Beam Suntory.
They understood their audience there, I think.
Yeah. All right. So those are probably not I know those are not the only things I got wrong. Oh, to my friends at Beam Suntory, I apologize.
Well, either way, if you're buying Suntory or buying Beam, I don't think they care a whole lot. It's all good. So cheers to Beam Suntory, 100 years of Suntory, and all of those that make spirits that we get to enjoy. And thanks to all the listeners who listen to us talk about the stuff we like to talk about.
Well, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Little magic with the coffee mug there. We can't cheers through StreamYard.
Yeah, these rubber sides, they don't work a whole lot. So.